Many mornings when I was 12, I was at the bus stop going to school. There was a young lady who would get to the bus stop just before me. She normally wore a white t-shirt and jeans and a pair of black high-heel shoes about 4 inches high. The base of the heel was about ½ inch by 3/4. She would stand there and fidget on her feet, many times balancing on the heels, then dropping down onto the toes hard. Many times I would let my bus go just so I could watch her feet. This particular morning, I got to the bus stop before her, and just where she normally stood, I dropped a thick worm. Looking up the road, I saw her coming, so I hid behind the bus shelter until she arrived. There was a gap of about 4 inches at the back of the shelter, so I could see her feet arrive. She stood about an inch from the worm, who by now was fully outstretched. She stood there for a couple of minutes, then started to move around. She put her heel on the end of the worm and stood on him. The worm was wriggling like mad, and I was wishing I was the worm. She moved again and stood right on the middle of the worm. This time she balanced on her heels. I watched as she twisted several times on the heels and cut the worm in two. She dropped down flat and moved again. This time the worm was being crushed under the sole of her shoes. By the time her bus arrived, the worm was a squashed mess on the pavement. I had a hard-on so big that I thought I was going to split my pants. I dreamt many times of a way I could get her to crush my fingers the way she crushed the worm. I came up with the idea that if I put a large piece of cardboard where she stood, she could crush me if I was the other side of the shelter by putting my hand underneath the cardboard. I got this large piece of cardboard, placed it in the very spot where she stood, and lay down behind the shelter with my hand palm up under the cardboard. I then heard footsteps, and looking under the shelter, I could see her coming, wearing the black shoes as normal. She stepped onto the cardboard and stood in the usual spot. I could feel pressure on my fingers, but it was not hurting as I expected, as she was an adult with adult weight. I had a peek underneath and found she had missed my fingers, as they were between the heel and the sole. The thought then hit me, will I be able to take her weight if she stood right on top of me? As I lay there thinking what to do, she made the decision for me and stood right on my little finger, just before the first knuckle with the heel. The pain was a lot more than I thought, but I knew I could take it, so I stayed still and quiet. It must have been a good 5 minutes she stood there. Then all of a sudden the pain grew to immense. She had stood on one leg with the other foot in the air, as she was scratching an itch on her toes. My eyes were watering with the pain. She put the other foot back down, and the pain lessened. All of a sudden the pain grew to nothing I had ever dreamed of. She was balancing back on her heels. I heard a bust pulling up. She then twisted with all of her weight on the one heel right on my finger. After she had gone, I pulled my hand from under the cardboard. My finger had gone numb and was very white. As the feeling came back to it, I realized that she had torn the skin on the knuckle side of my hand. It was several days before the tingling feelings had gone from my finger. Over the next few days, I saw the same lady doing exactly the same things as she had done on me. This would bring a grin to my face, as she never knew she had crushed my finger under her heel.